Minutes before one of the most carefully planned royal occasions of the year was set to begin, something happened inside Windsor Castle that almost no one outside the inner circle was ever meant to notice. Approved guests were turned away at the gates. Names vanished from an official registry that had already been finalized, and standing quietly at the center of it all was a man whose calm authority that afternoon would leave palace staff whispering for days. Reports now suggest that Prince William made a silent but unmistakable move ahead of Princess Anne's important event, removing several guests connected to Queen Camilla without a single public word. The decision was never announced, yet insiders claim it sent a shockwave through royal circles. So what truly unfolded behind those palace doors, and what does it reveal about the tensions now simmering beneath the monarchy's polished surface? But before we go deeper, tell me what you think. Was William defending tradition, or was he drawing battle lines? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories the public almost never hears. It began the moment the gates closed without warning. Just before Princess Anne's event was scheduled to start, confusion rippled quietly behind the security barriers. Guests who had already received their approval notices suddenly found themselves frozen at the entrance, offered no explanation at all. Electronic scanners flashed red again and again. Security officers exchanged tense, uncertain glances as one name after another, linked to Queen Camilla's social circle, was quietly refused at the door. At first, many assumed it was a simple technical fault, but the mood shifted sharply the instant palace staff realized the official guest registry had been altered only moments earlier. Aides connected to Camilla's office reportedly rushed toward the checkpoint, demanding answers that no one seemed willing to give. Some guests stood paralyzed in disbelief, while others scrambled to reach palace officials directly. There was no announcement, no visible confrontation, and yet the silence itself bred suspicion. The whole operation looked organized, controlled, and deliberate, and the question hanging in the air was impossible to ignore. Who had the power to rewrite that list at the final possible second, and what were they so determined to prevent? At the heart of the unfolding drama stood Lieutenant Colonel Johnny Thompson, normally regarded as one of the king's most trusted figures. That afternoon, he carried himself with an authority witnesses described as unusual. Dressed in ceremonial uniform, he personally monitored the revised access list and calmly instructed officers to deny entry to specific individuals. He reportedly offered no apology and no explanation. Those turned away were simply escorted from the area with quiet, almost surgical efficiency, but what unsettled observers most was the growing belief that Thompson was not acting alone. Nearby, Prince William was said to be watching events unfold from within the Windsor grounds. His presence was distant and silent, yet it added enormous weight to everything happening at the gates. Staff reportedly grew cautious the moment his involvement was even suspected. Some believed the Prince of Wales had personally approved the last-minute removals. Others insisted the security teams had acted on their own in response to private concerns. So which was it? An order from the future king himself, or something even more complicated unfolding behind the scenes? To understand why these names suddenly became a threat, you have to understand what had been quietly building for months. Queen Camilla's social network had appeared increasingly visible at royal gatherings, especially during the periods when King Charles III scaled back his public duties because of his health. Critics inside palace circles allegedly worried that certain donors, advisors, and high-profile contacts were gaining too much influence around key royal functions. Supporters of Camilla rejected these claims entirely, dismissing them as exaggerated and politically motivated attempts to push her out. The disagreement was rarely spoken aloud in public, yet inside the institution, it shaped far more conversations than anyone was willing to admit. For William, the stakes reportedly ran deeper than one guest list. Some insiders believed he feared Anne's meticulously organized event could be overshadowed by private interests and political optics tied to Camilla's allies. And if that was true, then the removals were never about security at all. They were the opening move in a much larger struggle. So what exactly was William trying to protect? And why did figures tied to Camilla suddenly feel like a danger to it? Anne, for her part, arrived at Windsor with a single goal. Her event would not become another chapter in the monarchy's growing tensions. While confusion lingered outside the gates, preparations inside the historic halls moved forward with almost military precision. Staff adjusted schedules, corrected seating, and redirected guests without drawing a flicker of public attention. From the outside, the ceremony looked calm and flawlessly organized. But behind that polished image, officials were working urgently to contain a situation that threatened to swallow the entire occasion. Security around the grounds was subtly reinforced, not in any alarming way, but enough to signal heightened awareness among senior aides. Entry points were watched more closely, and communication between departments grew faster and tighter than usual. For Anne, discipline that day seemed almost sacred. Across her public life, she had earned a reputation as one of the monarchy's most dependable and traditional figures, associated with duty, structure, and unwavering loyalty to protocol. Those who worked beside her that morning described a tone of quiet authority in every instruction, no theatrics, no visible frustration, only firm clarity about how the day would proceed. And staff understood instantly that deviations would not be tolerated. But why did Anne care so fiercely about control on this particular day? As the revised list circulated through palace offices, staff reportedly received fresh instructions about where the remaining guests should be seated. Several individuals tied to Camilla's wider network were no longer placed in key positions within the hall. Their seats were quietly filled by long-standing royal insiders, representatives of traditional charities, military organizations, and figures associated with Queen Elizabeth II's era. The changes were subtle enough to slip past the public eye, yet glaring to any experienced aide who knew what they were looking at. Some staff reportedly hesitated before carrying out the adjustments, fully aware of how sensitive even the smallest seating change could be, but the chain of approval left no room for doubt. The atmosphere grew even more revealing as William and Anne appeared increasingly aligned throughout the event. Neither addressed the removals openly, yet their coordination behind the scenes left a powerful impression. Aides noticed brief, wordless moments of communication between them, as if every decision had already been settled long before anyone else was told. This silent alignment hinted that the event was never just ceremonial, it was strategic. So who had truly approved these changes, and why were the old guards suddenly returning to the center of royal life? Once the ceremony ended, the real storm began. Throughout the evening, palace offices were reportedly flooded with calls from guests, advisors, and influential figures desperate to understand why their approved invitations had suddenly turned worthless. Some clung to the hope it was a security mistake. Others immediately sensed something far more deliberate. For many connected to Camilla's circle, the incident carried a sting of public humiliation that stretched well beyond a single afternoon. Wealthy donors and longtime social allies reportedly saw the removals as a blunt signal that their standing inside royal spaces had changed overnight. Access they once believed was untouchable now felt fragile, conditional, and gone in an instant. The silence from palace leadership only deepened the unease. And as speculation spread, attention swung straight back to William. Reports that he personally reviewed the guest list before Anne's ceremony fueled fears that the Prince of Wales was tightening his grip over royal access and internal operations. Supporters called it necessary protection during a delicate moment shaped by the king's health. Critics asked whether he had crossed an invisible line between oversight and raw personal power. So was this truly a mistake, or a calculated message that no one was ever meant to decode, and who exactly would be cut off next? Eventually, the pressure reached the one person who could not ignore it, King Charles III himself. Reports suggest he was informed about the removals only after concerns inside the palace had already boiled over. By then, it was no longer a private squabble over invitations. It had become a visible sign of shifting power within the monarchy. The timing made everything more delicate. Charles was already navigating health challenges that had thinned his schedule and increased his reliance on senior family members. During that very window, William and Anne reportedly grew more involved in the internal machinery of ceremonial planning and institutional management. Supporters framed it as protection. Others quietly wondered whether a transition of influence was beginning far sooner than anyone expected. Officials reportedly feared that if these divisions spilled into public view, the monarchy could face damaging scrutiny at the worst possible moment. For Camilla, the implications were impossible to overlook. Allies close to her circle allegedly recognized that the atmosphere had shifted, that the quiet confidence surrounding her social network was already fading under mounting institutional pressure. So was Charles losing his grip on the crown, or was a quieter force reshaping everything behind closed doors before anyone noticed? In the days that followed, the household reportedly changed in ways many staff felt instantly but few dared discuss. Several aides found themselves taking instructions from different offices than before. Responsibilities tied to scheduling, guest coordination, and ceremonial planning were allegedly reviewed with sharper scrutiny, with some staff quietly looking toward Kensington Palace for approvals that once flowed through separate channels. No formal announcement confirmed any of it, yet insiders sensed a growing concentration of influence around William and his closest advisors. Anne's role appeared more vital than ever, a stabilizing figure for officials anxious to protect traditional standards. And Lieutenant Colonel Johnny Thompson, after overseeing the removals, increasingly seemed less like a ceremonial presence and more like the disciplined enforcer of a monarchy quietly redefining its priorities. Royal insiders reportedly began describing the mood with a single chilling phrase: the arrival of a new order. What started as one disputed guest list now looked like the clearest sign yet that the balance of royal power was already shifting. Was William defending royal tradition or quietly seizing control of Camilla's influence ahead of Anne's event? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you want the next chapter of this unfolding power struggle, stay close. This is Royal Pulse, where whispers around the crown come to light.